Welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. We are your co-hosts, Jenny McIntyre, pastor and emotional intelligence coach, and Marybeth Steigenga, counselor and relationship coach. We believe that everyone has an extraordinary story to share. Together, we invite you to embark on a journey of self-discovery as we unravel the profound wisdom that lies in looking back to propel us forward. Prepare to be moved and inspired by tales of unwavering resilience, personal growth, and the pursuit of authentic living, including your own. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of storytelling. Because when you tell your story, you have the potential to change your life. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you can be inspired. Welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast where we, Jenny McIntyre, a pastor and emotional intelligence coach, and my fearless friend Marybeth Steigenga, a counselor and relationship coach, believe that everyone, even you, has a story to share. And we believe in the power of that story.
Yes, we do, Jenny. We do believe in the power of telling your story. And so on tonight's episode, we're going to learn a little bit more about me, Marybeth, and hopefully gain some insight into the importance of story and how it plays out in your life, in your relationships, in your healing, and how the structure of the storytelling and how you get to learn from your story and share your story with others and heal from your story. And I titled tonight's episode Embracing the Mess, because most of the time that's usually what I'm saying to myself is, you're a mess, Marybeth. And I have learned that that's okay, that it's okay to be a mess, and that I can embrace it, because that's where growth happens. And that is where healing truly begins, when I'm honest with myself. So let's get started. I am going to start with a story inventory. And I'm going to tell you some stories of positive impact and some stories of negative impact. And of course, I can't cover all of my stories because we would be here all night and into next week. But I will cover just a few. And then as we go, we'll point out some themes and some core beliefs and all kinds of good stuff that we can learn from our stories, how to heal from our stories and all that good stuff.
Marybeth, let me interrupt you right there. Can you
Yep.
tell us a little bit of what core beliefs mean?
Yeah, so core beliefs are a way that you learn to interpret the world around you, your relationships, and your thoughts about yourself based on your experiences with your early childhood families of origin, with your experiences and your interactions with others. And they can be positive and they can be negative. So we're going to get into all of that good stuff later, but that is what basically a core belief is. And I'm going to tell you what some of mine are coming up here. And a theme, right? We're going to also talk about themes that happen in your life. And themes can be things that show up over and over and over again in your life. And I think when you tell your story, it becomes pretty obvious what some of those themes are. And how they then impact you. Okay, so let's get started with my story inventory. So I was born into a Christian family, and I was the youngest of 6 children. And one of my first memories is of my mom telling the story of when she found out she was pregnant with me, and that she told me, Marybeth, I cried. I didn't want to have any more children. I thought I was done having children. My next brother was going into kindergarten, and so she was done. She thought she was done, and so she cried. And even though she said it with a smile, I know that, and it was kind of a joke in our family, like she cried when she found out. But it was, the first thought she had of me was one of regret. Right. And so even as an infant in the womb, a baby in the womb, you internalize those messages.
Of course.
But having said that about her, she was the most amazing mom. And I remember laying on her lap at night and she would take a pencil and trace in my hair. And I used to love to have my hair played with. She would read books to me and she would say my prayers and she would tuck me in at night. And she was just always there. All of my physical needs and emotional needs were met. She was an amazing person.
And I think you bring an important point, right? Because I don't think that anybody gets up in the morning, most parents anyway, don't get in the morning and say, today I'm going to screw up my child by something I'm going to say, right? And you're putting the example of your mom, which sounds to me like she was a fabulous mom. And yet that remark and the ongoing joke had an impact on you.
Yeah, exactly. And I know as when I had my children as well, I didn't wake up in the morning and go, how badly can I, traumatize my child and have them need therapy when they're an adult, right? I didn't do that.
Exactly.
But, and even though my mom never said to me as a child, like when I was out of the womb, that I was unwanted or whatever, that was still something that impacted me, that story. So,
Of course.
um,
Of course.
so yeah. So then my dad, who owned his own business, he left early in the morning, usually before I was even awake, and he would come home like at 6. So we were eating dinner. He was funny and he was kind to me. And I remember sitting in his lap and in his rocking chair, and he would tell me funny stories. And through these experiences, I did learn that I was loved, valued, and accepted by my parents as a child. So those were positive stories from my story inventory. Then, as I started to age, I have lots of stories of loss in my life. Starting when I was 8 years old, my uncle and my cousin were killed in a plane crash. And my mom had to spend a lot of time with my grandparents who lived out of state, helping them process their grief. And she wasn't really available to me during that time through no fault of her own. But that was just a true statement.
How old were
Um,
you ballpark during that time?
Yeah, I was 7 or 8 during that
Mhm.
time. And it was during the summer. It happened in July. And I remember we spent the rest of the whole summer with my grandparents. And my mom and my grandparents were obviously wrecked and destroyed by this loss. And so that was a very strange summer for me, staying at my grandparents' house. And I will talk about how that impacted me in a little bit here. At age 12, my grandpa died. At age 16, my brother's fiance was killed in a car accident, like 1 block from our house. At age 24, my brother died from cancer. And by the time I was 26, I had no grandparents left. The
Wow.
loss would become a major theme in my life and would continue throughout my life, throughout my adult life. So my mom died in 2014, my dad died in 2016, and my other brother died from heart failure in 2017. So just like a lot of
A lot of love.
loss.
Mm.
And then I always like to talk about loss in two different ways, right? You have death losses, but you also have non-death losses. And so lots of things happen to you in life. Moving across the country and losing your support system can be a loss. I had a business that failed in my early 30s, and that loss of that business also resulted in some pretty negative core beliefs for me.
Hmm.
My dad, like I mentioned, he was a kind man and he was full of praise and encouragement, but he was not, I should say, he was not full of praise and encouragement. He was better at pointing out what I did wrong than what
Mm.
I did right. And a good story that I like to say is my short career as a second baseman in Brookfield Park and Rec softball when I was 11 years old. My dad would come to the games and he would always point out, like, oh, you missed that, or you didn't do that right, or you should have hit that one. And he would never point out, like, hey, good job for making that catch, or good job for hitting that pitch, or whatever. So I always got used to it was always the negative that was reinforced and not the positive. And even as an adult, my dad would come over. I was married and parenting children of my own. And he would come to my house and say, oh, your front porch needs to be swept off, or your air filter needs to be changed, or you have a long list of things, your grass needs to be cut. But he would never say, like, oh, thanks for preparing that delicious meal for me for today. So I got used to looking for the negative and not positive, which
Criticism.
reinforced, right? Which reinforced some core beliefs.
Mm,
And you know what's really interesting? I was thinking about this the other day is that is how I parent my children. Now, I don't necessarily point out all the negative stuff. I refrain from doing that, but I'm not very good at saying, hey, good job, or I'm proud of you, or wow, you really were successful at that. I didn't learn to do it. And so it's hard for me. And so I was like, wow, I really internalized that message. And I'm now doing it um, with my child or children. My daughter said to me the other day, her boyfriend said, I'm so proud of you for working so hard. And she said, I started to cry because I'm not used to hearing that. And I go, yeah, that's on me because I never was good at saying that. That's just not what I learned to do. So, one of the things about learning your story, if you learn it early in your life, you can correct some of these things,
exactly.
right? That
Exactly.
now that I'm in my 50s, I'm trying to correct some of these things. I wish that I would have learned this earlier when my kids were small, because I could have made some of these course corrections.
You and me both. I met you at 45 years old, and that's part of a different story, but I met you at 45 years old. Well, yes, around that time, more like 41, 41. And I was really angry that I was just learning everything that you taught me because I'm like, oh, I had already caused so many messes. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. It's like if you can learn the importance of your story early in your life, the better you'll be. But again, there's healing in every layer and every year. It's, better late than never for sure.
Absolutely. Could not agree
For
more
sure.
with you.
So one of the other things a story that impacted me was I was not a great student going through elementary school, especially in math. I really struggled. I didn't understand it. I found it hard. I still actually find it hard and I don't understand it. But I really struggled and I used to have tutors and have to go to like special classes to learn math. And so even though no one was saying you're not smart enough or you're stupid, no one ever said that to me, but that's a message that kind of I internalized from that as well.
Hmm.
My parents were both really hard workers, and I did learn the importance of hard work and finishing what you start. And so that was a positive story from my youth. So you can see that there are some themes that pop up in my story, right? Loss is a huge one. Um, Another theme is having to take care of others. Like I need to be a caretaker because all of those times that there were losses when I was little, my mom was not always available for me because she was dealing with other things. And so I kind of had to be on my own. I had to learn like to meet my own needs during those times. And whenever I would see someone sad, I would try to make them feel better. So I became like a caretaker.
Hmm.
But I kind of also learned that it wasn't okay for me to have needs because there wasn't time during those things, right? And so I didn't develop the ability to identify my own needs. And so that's definitely a core belief that I have. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, this caretaking role um, leads me, here we go. This is my painful thing I'm going to admit to everybody tonight. It leads me to problems with setting boundaries, Jenny Mac.
Mhm.
I struggle with setting boundaries, not only having people trample on my boundaries, but also me like trampling on other people's, like trying to fix them when they don't want to be fixed or trying to meet their needs when they don't want their needs met. So I really feel like it's my responsibility to make others feel better. And that's really not my job.
Mhm.
And so that is something that I have struggled with. There's a theme of poor self-esteem and self-worth, and that's cultivated by me feeling like a failure in school and not being able to meet my dad's expectations. Um, And a positive theme, again, is feeling loved, valued, and accepted by my family. That is something that not every child gets to come out of childhood with. So that was something that was super important. So yeah, so those are my themes. And then you get to go on to some beliefs that I developed as a result of some of these stories. And I talked about it earlier as I'm not smart enough is one.
Mm.
I that one pops up all the time. And even though I have a PhD in counseling, I still, when someone will say, you should try this, I'll say my internal messages, and it pops up all the time. I'm not smart enough. I can't do that. I'm not smart enough.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
not true, but it does pop up, and it has stopped me from doing things in my life. Like when I went to college for my undergrad, I really wanted to be a nurse, but I was like, oh, I can never be a nurse because I'm not good at math and science. I'm not smart enough. I can't do it. I think I probably would have made a pretty good nurse, but I just never tried because I just was not, that was the core belief that stopped me. Another core belief is it's not okay for me to have needs. I'm not good enough. I'm on my own. Those are just to name some of them. No one said these things to me directly. It's just how I came to develop that belief based on those stories and my interactions, and it's just crazy how your brain fills in the blanks for you based
Yes.
on some of those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have these beliefs about myself, right? So now what? So now what do? You've got these core beliefs, you've identified them. Now comes the hard work, right? Now comes the work of I have to dispute them. I have to speak truth. I have to get some support maybe to do this. And I'm still a work in progress, right? It's just these beliefs will continue to pop up as I go along. But here's the good news. I do recognize them now. I am able to call them out and to kind of speak truth and dispute them. And to say things like, hey, you have your counseling degree, you have this certification, you did succeed in this thing. And so it does dispute them, and you can kind of trick your brain into believing the good stuff if you repeat it.
That is powerful. That is powerful. I was telling a client the other day that the best way to dispute the lies that your emotions or your trauma tell you is with facts. So it's always good. Like, I love what you just did. You made an inventory of things that you have accomplished that can undeniable proof to your emotions and to your trauma that you are valuable, that you are worthy, that you are smart. I just love it.
Yeah, and you aren't you don't have to be held back by those beliefs. You can overcome them. You do have the ability to overcome them. There is no magic wand to wave over it and make it easy, though. It just is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of hard work to
And
do.
when you talk about hard work, Marybeth, what do you mean?
So for me, the hard work is to identify it. So when it pops up is to identify it. And then, yes, I have to do the work of disputing it, whether it's making that inventory of things that I have accomplished, saying positive affirmations about myself until it actually becomes true. It might mean, and I did this early in my 30s and again later in life, it might mean getting with a counselor or a therapist or a coach to help you see the things that you don't see and point out the things that you don't necessarily see in your own life. And none of that is fun. Reading the books and doing the journaling and all of that hard work that comes with healing.
But boy, it pays. Boy, it pays. I remember when you first told me that I needed to dispute it and start redirecting my thoughts. I remember how exhausting it was. When you first start, it's exhausting, but it's like an airplane that spends most of its gas when it's departing and when it's landing. But once you are up, you start cruising. And I think that's important for our listeners and our viewers to hear that you know, it may be hard work at the beginning, but it pays dividends, right?
Yes, it does. And you're right. I love that analogy of the airplane. It is exhausting at first. It does become easier with time.
Yes.
And so just you need a little grit and a little perseverance to kind of to stick with it. And get yourself somebody. If you can't do it on your own, get yourself a coach or a counselor or even a friend who can help you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you don't
Absolutely.
have, yeah, get somebody that can help support you. And then part of moving forward too is doing, here we go, the hard work of forgiveness, right? It's identifying those people who have hurt you, whether they did it intentionally or not,
Mhm.
and to forgive, and to not, I think part of telling your story too is to not look back and blame. Like, I don't want to blame my parents,
I
but
love that.
I also, it's okay to name what happened to me. And
Absolutely.
right. And so I think we go, oh, we like to make excuses. Well, they did the best they could with what they had, and they had trauma from when they were younger. And so as a result, and I think don't excuse it, just name it. It's okay.
Exactly. We
It's
look
okay.
we look back to understand, not to blame. But girl, if we start making excuses there, we're missing the most important part of understanding, and that is that regardless of where the abuse comes from, it's inexcusable. If it was done to us, even if it was caused by prior trauma or whatever, it was not okay. And I think that's part of us valuing ourselves, our hearts, our emotions, is to say what happened to me was not okay. And this is the impact it had on me. And it doesn't mean that we're blaming or keeping scores, but it means that we're, like you said, we're naming it for what it is, right?
Yeah. And that is a huge, to say it out loud and to name it is a huge part of healing.
Absolutely.
So go ahead and do it and don't feel guilty about it.
Yes.
I learned as part of the healing process, I need to be kind to myself and to take care of myself, and that it's okay to have self care and to have needs that need to be met. I don't have to always worry about meeting everybody else's needs. I know, Jenny, you and I are similar in this, as we love to serve and care for others. We don't necessarily put our needs
Yes.
on the front burner. So it
Yeah.
is okay to do that. Um, and yeah, and part of my healing was going to see a counselor who helped me move forward through some of that stuff. I heard a quote the other day. It was, sometimes you need to circle back in order to move forward. And
Ooh,
I do really love that quote, because sometimes you do need to circle back and look at some of the stuff from your past in order for you to move forward.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And like we said, it's not the blame. It's about saying, like, I was hurt and I need to grieve and forgive that so that I can move forward and live the life I want. Not to say my parents screwed me up and so now I can't live the life I want, right? It's to say I was hurt and now I need to move forward and I can have the life
And
that I want.
and that is very important there, Mary Beth, because we can we can look back to justify our behavior, our actions, and how screwed up we are. Or we can look back to understand and say, now I'm going to take control over my life and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to break that toxicity and to be different and to change my patterns of behavior, to process whatever. Is very like the easy route is to say, oh, woe is me. I have been wronged. But that the idea of reflecting on our story and telling our story is to use it as a catapult, right? To get better.
Exactly. Exactly. Is to not get stuck in that victim mentality of I was wrong. I like to use the analogy of, if you walk out into the street tomorrow and someone runs you over with their car, that was their fault, right? And your leg is now broken. So you can lay in the street with a broken leg and say, oh, this is
Oops.
so terrible. I have a broken leg and I'm a victim and I'm never going to heal. Or you can get up and go get the surgery and get the physical therapy and heal. So that's your responsibility, regardless of what happened to you. It's now your responsibility to to do the healing and the hard work of that.
That's right on, girl. That's so powerful right there. And sometimes we don't think of emotional trauma like that, but we need to start to do that. Like, don't stay in the middle of the road and moan about it, right?
Right. Because that's not going to get you anywhere. You're just going to stay in the road for the rest of your life, and nobody wants that.
I have one really cute for you real quick. I had the story of it's a fictitious story, of course, of a stranger that was looking for an address and is asking someone that he sees rocking in the neighborhood, sir, how can I get there? And the guy is there rocking and has a dog sitting. And as the guy starts giving the guy directions, the dog goes, oh, and the guy's like, what's wrong? But it happened 3 more times. Every time the guy was talking, the dog just howls like something horrible is happened to him. And after the guy gets his directions, he goes back to the guy that gave him the directions and said, I'm really sorry. I know it's not my business, but what's wrong with your dog? And the guy replies, well, he's just sitting on a nail. And the guy goes, if he's sitting on a nail, why doesn't he get up? And the gentleman replies, well, it's because it hurts him enough to complain, but not enough to do anything about it. And I love using that story. It's very similar to the broken leg in the street. I mean, we can just complain and play victims. Woe is me, but we're going to keep hurting. And that's only hurting ourselves.
Yeah. It's only hurting ourselves and everybody else who's associated with us.
For sure. It goes way beyond our own pain, right? Yep.
Yeah. So that kind of gives you the basic outline of what telling your story looks like. And so I know in our next episode, Jenny, you are going to introduce us to your story and tell us some of your themes and core beliefs as a result of your stories of impact. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I want to encourage our listeners too to kind of start thinking about what is their story and how can they learn from it? How can they heal from it? And I know later on in the podcast, we're going to start asking them to share their stories with us. And I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. You're listening, you're viewing this podcast. Know that this is not just about Marybeth and I. What we're trying is to model what we are hoping you can do, because there is power in telling our stories. And what we want to do through this podcast is strengthen each other, understand, and gain insight by listening to each other's stories. So Marybeth and I are going first, as she said, to model it. And then we can't wait to hear yours and learn from your story. And just to leave people on a cliffhanger, the title of my personal story is Narcissist Interrupted. So if you want to hear more about that, you're just going to have to tune in for our next podcast.
We will look forward to that, and we will see everybody then.
Marybeth, thank you for sharing your story so candidly and honestly. I know that some people that have heard us and seen us today can relate probably with your whole story or with aspects of your story. And hopefully the healing has just begun.
All right, Jenny, we'll see you next time.
See you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.